Welcome, everyone. I hope you can all hear me online and in person. We do have, just a minute ago, I saw 43 people joining us online, and that's great. We're here today to learn all about Wagner from Dr. Dan Sherman. And before I start telling you a little more about his bio, I just want to remind everybody to turn their devices off. That would be very helpful. And we're going to have a presentation for about 80 minutes, and then we're going to take questions at that point. And the people who are online, you can put your questions in Q&A. We're using that instead of chat. So quick Q&A is where you'll put your questions. I'll be sitting here at the computer, and I'll be sharing those questions with Dan when we get to that question part. Okay. So some of you know Dr. Dan Sherman. He is on the board of a local Wagner Society. And generally, people know him as giving talks to Encore and many other groups about musical theater, film, and film music, along with the occasional talk on classical music, and occasionally on math and science and economics, probably.
Sure.
Dan's earliest Wagner moment came while watching Bugs Bunny. How old were you?
5 or 6.
5 or 6, okay, which quickly sparked his interest in Wagner. He then discovered the Solti ring at his local library and began a lifelong passion for listening to recordings and reading books about Wagner. He was an early member of the Wagner Society of the District of Columbia and made 3 trips to Beirut, including the Society's first trip to the Green Hill in 2000. He's addressed many groups in the Washington area on music, theater, and film. He has spoken at several Wagner societies, including the Washington Society of DC, on enjoying Wagner on record and the history of Wagner at the Met. He holds a PhD in economics from Cornell and lives in Alexandria. Dan, we're pleased to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to just mention this screen that you're seeing here. That's what Q&A looks like for the people who are online, and that's where you'll put your questions, and we will attend to all of them at the end. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you all. It's great to be here, chatting about a favorite topic of mine. You may have recognized some music from Goethe Room, that massive 10, 12-minute piece of music, Siegfried's Funeral March, which, being Wagner, anybody else would have just dropped the curtain, but Wagner went on for 12 minutes. Before we get going too far, I want to ask, first, I want to make an apology in advance. We had some technical problems here, so I ended up transferring my slides over to PowerPoint. You'll see a few glitches, but bear with them. Some images of Wagnerian, associated with Wagnerian opera. We have the composer himself, who was known for his rather eccentric dress. In the center, we have a classic old Wagner performance from the 1930s, Lawrence Melchior here in Lohengrin. And then we probably have one of the best known Wagnerian performances, voted the greatest cartoon of all time, What's Opera Doc, where many an opera singer got their introduction to Wagner. Before we go too far with Wagner, I'll just ask some people in the room, and hopefully people will hear shout it out. When you think of Wagner, what do you think of? Richard Wagner? Not Richard Wagner. Richard. Anybody? Give me
The ring cycle.
Ring Cycle. Lady in the back. The Ring Cycle. What else?
Rienzi.
Rienzi, that's an unusual one. Beyond the operas, what type of composer was he? Long. What do Wagnerian singers look like? Kill the Wabbit. It had big voices, big bodies. Here, what are his operas short and to the point? Are they long, famously long, etc.? Also, he was a rather nasty man, often considered to be an anti-Semite, etc., etc. Now, Wagner, there's a lot attached to the name. So, just for the fun of it, I thought it'd make you smile before we got started. You can read it. It's taking forever. I shouldn't have put the load on the Ring Cycle. 15 hours. I would argue, as somebody who has seen the Ring Cycle in performance maybe 20 times, and wearing a Ring Cycle T-shirt here, it goes by amazingly quickly. It can. So today's class, what are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to cover Wagner and his work, and we're going to do it, in 80 minutes or thereabouts. And what I hope to do is show you how wonderful Wagner is, but also how accessible he is. Because I'm sure some of you, when I do a Citizen Kane talk, people go, oh, like college, reading the Iliad or Paradise Lost or Dostoevsky. Sure, it's great, but it's not a lot of fun. Well, there's a reason people like Wagner and line up for his work, et cetera, et cetera. So, and hopefully you'll get some of that today. And I'm going to talk about, even if you don't particularly like Wagner, even if you're not familiar with him, even if you don't really want to learn too much about him, you don't want to listen to his music, you should. He's incredibly important. And not only for music, but really for a very wide world of art outside of music too. So, and particularly outside of opera when it comes to music. So I'm going to give you some resources. The office will be sending that to you. There'll be some links, there'll be some slips you can look at, there'll be some good books, etc. And some of these will be, the Wagner 101. People who like Wagner a lot, they're sometimes called Wagnerians, or alternatively, when you go to see a ring cycle, ring heads. I'm one. So we're going to talk about his work. You'll hear a lot of little musical excerpts. They may get shorter and shorter as on goes. So, but what I hope you'll do when you'll have these excerpts and you have the resources, you'll just take the time to follow up. Listen to a couple of the performances, and I'll steer you towards some videos you may want to watch that have his music. And with Blink, you might go out and buy one of these sets, the classical music industry, complete operas, Richard Wagner, all 13, 10 of which are well-known, Rienzi not so well-known, included in the box there. You can buy a ring cycle. I mowed many a lawn to buy my ring cycle back in the 1970s. You can get the Schulte ring cycle for $40 now. So cheap. There we go. So who was Richard Wagner? Who are we talking about here? And with Siegfried's Horn Call. So he is undoubtedly one of the 3 or 4 greatest opera composers. With Verdi, Mozart, Puccini. I'll give Puccini a pass. He's not my favorite, but Verdi, if you put me in a dark room, I would say Verdi's probably the greatest composer, but so is Mozart. It's hard to beat it when you're talking about the great, but Wagner certainly is very, very important. Wagner lived 1813 to 1883, and he's German and romantic music. He's writing at a time in the 1830s and 40s where Germany isn't a nation, it's coming together. And part of what brought Germany together were their folk tales, their myths, their legends. The Grimm fairy tales came at that time. You had a composer starting to write kind of like spooky fairy tales, etc. And Wagner is right in the middle of that. So he's going to write 10 music dramas. He didn't call them operas, by and large. He called them music dramas because he saw music and words and plots hand in hand. A complaint, and I think it's a legitimate one. There's a lot of composers, they write wonderful music, but the music in a Rossini opera is, you're listening to the singers, it's great music, you're not that interested in the plot, you're listening to the singers to see how high they can go. Wagner said, no, I am trying to tell a story. The music is going to be an incredibly important part of that. I think what distinguishes the stereotype here, German music, German opera composers versus Italian or perhaps French. The Germans, the Italians are showing off the voices. Yeah, the orchestration can be relatively light, not necessarily memorable, but you get the bel canto, beautiful singing. You'll get a composer like Verdi, yes, spectacular orchestration, wonderful orchestra. You get a composer like Wagner, I won't say you almost don't need the voices, they're very important. But Wagner, incredibly influenced by Beethoven, is saying, I am going to tell a story in the orchestra. That's going to be a key player along with the voices and what you see on stage. So Wagner's going to write his 10 operas, music dramas. Orchestra is very important. He also writes his own libretto, and for better or worse, he writes a lot of prose. Very, very difficult to read, a little bit muddled and confused. Some of it is going to get him in trouble. He writes a pamphlet called Judaism Music. Should have gone to bed that night. All it did to his reputation here. But he had a lot of thinking He was a real philosopher. He was an incredibly well-read man, too. And the Wagner literature is infinite. You can get 4-volume biographies. People are cranking it out. The music, what does it mean? The Wagner Society of Washington, D.C. just published a 991-page book on Wagner's Ring, full of musical examples. I think I'm the only person who actually read it and played through it as of yet. It just came out in September. But a lot of material, people say, somebody went down to the Library of Congress. I don't know if it's true, but looked up the references. And next to Jesus and Napoleon, you have Richard Wagner. He has inspired a lot of discussion, and not simply since World War II, Hitler, and all. So what would Wagner have said about himself? He was Beethoven and Shakespeare in one person. He wrote these wonderful dramas, and then he put music to it. So what does that tell you about Wagner? Well, who was he really? It's been a while since I've done this talk, so it's kind of fun. So Wagner, it may not surprise you, was an unbelievably arrogant person, dishonest with people's money, with people's wives. He just happened to write incredibly beautiful music. Got an echo there for some reason. That's a little bit about music from Act 2 of Christian here. So just an example, I want you to keep in mind, very often when people think of Wagner, they think it's loud, it's right of the Valkyrie, it's thumping, it's not melodic, it's not pretty. Well, it's some of the most beautiful, some would say some of the most seductive music ever written. Too. He's a German nationalist. He was writing Go Germany, so was Verdi. And needless to say, in the 1930s, people picked up on that. But Wagner was doing it at a time when Germany was 80 small states, and that didn't get along. He wanted Germany to be a strong nation with a great tradition and to move forward. So, the topic, anti-Semitic, he certainly is anti-Semitic in writing, but what's interesting about Wagner, he would say, I have poison in my system, I need to get it out. He would be in person. He, and particularly his second wife, were anti-Semitic oftentimes. It's slightly shaded, but it's a whole industry about Wagner's anti-Semitism. But when you get to his music, not so much. Yeah, I mean, the Nazis, if anyone was going to play it up, it would have been the Nazis, the bits and pieces. They didn't play it up. So I didn't see it there. And Wagner, on a one-on-one basis, it was arguably when people were useful to him, when Jewish conductors could conduct his music or could take his operas out for performance, he was actually, not anti-Semitic. Though he might have said a few nasty things, like to guess it. He knew how to make enemies and offend people, at least those not of use to him. And of course, he really was a genius because we wouldn't care about him. He didn't write this wonderful music. It would be a minor figure, not all of his works. But what he would say was he was a genius. He was very self-professed, and he would say the world owed him a living. He was an artist who lived by different standards. He happened to like a man's wife. He happened to like the man's wife. If he needed some money, which he always did, and you gave it to him, he would say, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm a genius, etc. So we'll talk more about Wagner. What did he do? Well, Wagner loved Greek myth. When you think of the Wagnerian operas, some people, Verdi is controversial because he writes La Traviata, contemporary people. Orman, you can think about the operas here. A lot of contemporary stories. Wagner goes back to myth. And as a child, he loved Greek myth, the Odyssey. I'm reading the Odyssey right now. It's got a lot of Wagner too. But you can see that Wagner liked epic poetry. A lot of the elements that drives epics you will find in Wagner. But he wanted to create, the Greeks were long gone, and he wanted to create a German counterpart to Greek myths. So his idea, when he wrote the Ring Cycle as an example, the Greeks apparently would get together for 3 or 4 days for these grand festivals. Well, people were going to get together for 3 or 4 days to watch Wagner. which they now do when they see the ring cycle here. And his operas, they're not based contemporary, as they're based on myths. And he really wrote the stories. Again, there's another fascinating element of Wagner. It's not like he just opened up a book and said, here's a good story, let's turn that into an opera. He went to a lot of sources, pulled them together, and added to them, etc. So he was a real, if you will, synthesizer here. So his operas, they can be semi-historical, legendary, mythic. The only opera that's set, these stories were all getting well known in Germany in the 1820s, 1830s, 1840s when Wagner was working. So he is pulling these stories together, turning them into opera librettos. That's how I. And what myth does, what's really interesting, people read Wagner with interest. Dreadful stuff to read, but he was saying the myths are something they're powerful because it's Joseph Campbell before his time, or Freud before his time, or Jung before his time, saying these have, they're feelings that we identify with, they're timeless. I'm going to take you back to those. And we all know what they're about. We all react to them. And I'm going to put them on stage with very, very powerful music. We'll talk about that music. So Wagner, after the fact, he would say, my music is what people cannot say to themselves, or do not know what they say. It's the unconscious. It's before Freud, it's before Jung. So he will bring together a lot of sources, and then he will use his music grammar. And the idea the music has to be written very, very carefully with the words. And what Wagner would hate is what everybody loves about Wagner. When you go to see the Ring Cycle, you don't have to say all 15 hours to appreciate the Ring Cycle. As a matter of fact, what you often get with Wagner, you will listen to the music. And Wagner, his music is supposed to be part of the opera. You can't listen to it separately. So there's a lot of excerpts of Wagner. People love the orchestral parts of Wagner. They love excerpts from the opera. They're called bleeding chunks. What's unusual about Wagner as a composer, and I think it's pretty unique among opera composers, Wagner is somebody, he's very popular in the concert hall, certainly has been. He's popular in the opera house. For the same pieces. Mozart is writing symphonies and operas. Of course, Mozart is writing Verdi. They're writing overtures. But you typically do not hear orchestral pieces pulled out of most operas to be heard. For Wagner, you might hear, you get symphonic synthesis. Get rid of those voices. Let me just give you 20 beautiful minutes. Kristen. So it makes them unusual, but it also makes them more approachable. Because I know people will say, I can't stand voices, particularly Wagnerian voices. I say, go listen to the music. Well, you can go listen to the music. The music is wonderful. Wagner's early years, here he is. He was known as a small man with a large head and bulging eyes. Yeah, not the most attractive man, I would say. But he's won Leipzig, Germany, Battle of Leipzig, Napoleon and all is fighting there. He has Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. He loves it. He loves the idea of pulling together music and words here. He doesn't have a whole lot of formal training. He comes from a theatrical family, but he's not a child prodigy. As a matter of fact, he starts composing without knowing a whole lot of music. He eventually gets some music education, but in some ways he's self-taught. Spends a little bit of time in the university, mostly drinking, etc. But all the time he has this vision of what opera should be, what's going on. But he is going to write Rienzi. He's going to write a couple of operas. Rarely hear them at all. Rienzi is this big, spectacular opera. Lots of crowds marching. It's 13th century Rome. It's just what people like for the opera. Something grand and glorious. Has some great marches in it. You rarely hear it, oddly enough, for people who know their opera. Bayreuth Festival, Wagner's own theater, for the first time in 100 plus years, is actually going to do Rienzi. So he's going to marry an actress, Mina, a little bit older. He's 23, she's 26. Actually, for both of them, they do not get along. Wagner then writes The Flying Dutchman. It's really his first Wagner opera. And, it's a mythic Dutchman who travels the world until he can find a woman he will love, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a Wagnerian in that it's long. If you do it the way Wagner wanted, is one act, it's 2.5 hours. People typically split it up into pieces, but it's Wagnerian in terms of characters are singing of their inner feelings in long, uninterrupted arias. And there's themes that come in and get repeated. They're not going to be as developed as they are later in the opera, but you're beginning to hear Wagner. Really, really good music. And Wagner could write beautifully for the orchestra, even then. And you'll hear this next excerpt, the Flying Dutchman overture. The wild ship, the ship on the wild sea. He also wrote Tannhäuser, The Tale of Redemption, legendary times here, Middle Ages here, famous for the Pilgrim's Chorus. And what is one of his most popular operas, you'll often see it, the Knight, Holy Grail tale, Knight in shining armor comes save a woman. Here, Lohengrin, Vestum, the wedding march. Here comes the bride. That's Wagner, though when you see it on stage, it's about 30 minutes. Flying Dutchman. Nice descriptive music, really program music before its time, because Faust is going to be right. Well, during all this time, Wagner is working as a conductor. He's written these operas. He's trying to get them produced. The Enzi is a great success. Now, Flying Dutchman, people say it's weird. Tannhäuser not so successful. Lohengrin, he's going to write, and it's going to actually end up being successful, but he's not going to hear it for another 12 years. Why is this? Well, for two reasons. One, he's going to end up moving from city to city. And partly that's because he builds up a whole lot of debt and he needs to get out of town. But the other thing that happens to him, he is in exile, nearly 12 years. Really a fascinating life. Here's a little bit of Lohengrin. I want you to hear it though. Lohengrin, there's all sorts of productions. Here's a very fairy tale production from the Salzburg. You can see just beautiful, a little bit grainy. But when people say Wagner, just wrote the brass band, thumping tubs, screaming ladies, I'll say, listen to Act 1 of Lohengrin, which is describing the Holy Grail coming down. This is sort of Simon Rattle, British. And this is a little soft to start out with. The middle. Beautiful music here. And when you get books on orchestration, you'll learn Wagner, how to write with strings, how to write, in this case, Lohengrin, divided strings. So Wagner is going to find himself in exile. The music comes through that. Dark and depressing music. Anyway, he's expelled from Germany. He's involved in some of the revolutions. He basically can't go back to his home state of Saxon. He finds himself living in various places. Here, basically well ahead of the debt collector while he's at it. And for the 5 years, he's written Lohengrin in 1848. He never gets to hear it, or it takes 12 years for him to hear it. But he comes up with this idea. He is going to write an opera called Siegfried's Death, great hero Siegfried. We would know that as Goethe Daimler, Twilight of the God. But then the problem is, it's such a long story. There's so many things to tell. He ends up writing the opera Young Siegfried, or Siegfried. Then he said, I need to explain what we got to in Siegfried. So he writes the Valkyrie, the libretto, and then he writes Das Rheingold, and everything's started. And he's taking all these old legends and pulling them together. And when it comes time to write it, he starts out, Götterdämmerung was going to be the end of it, the final opera, Siegfried's death, we would call it. So he starts on Rheingold, and he's working on this. And these are immense operas. They're long operas. They're going to be very difficult to sing. He knows it. And he's chasing the law, basically. And, he has very little income. He's borrowing his way, but he's got it in him. Damn it. Here's the language. He's going to write this. So when you hear Wagner spend 26 years on the Ring, that's not quite true. He started in 1848, didn't put a note down, 5 years working on the librettos, reading them with friends. Then he's going to write Rheingold. We'll see the dates on it. He'll write Valkyrie. He'll write Siegfried. Then he'll take a break for 12 years, and he'll come back, and etc. But by the time he finishes it, and he's a much greater composer than he was when he started. 26 years of experience, 20 years of writing, I should say. But so here are the dates. So he writes Rheingold, the Valkyrie, and then he'll write Act 1 and 2 of Siegfried. He'll come back, fascinatingly. He'll finish it up Act 2, 12 years later. That's a whole lot like the rest of Act 2 of Siegfried. But Act 3, he's in another world. In Götterdämmerung, he becomes the great Wagner, the absolute master. Some would say the magician of the orchestra. Here. So he and his wife, he's married to his wife as much as he sees her. There's a silk merchant, a fellow named Otto Wesendonck in Switzerland. And Wagner had an affair with wife. It's not clear how far that affair went. She wrote some songs that he would set, songs, words that he set to music, the Wesendonck leader here. And they're in love. She's the perfect woman for him, except she's devoted to her husband. Not so good having your wife sitting with you while you're having an affair. I don't say that from experience here. But he loves Matilda Wesendonck, which is strange to love your patron, the man who's keeping you, letting you live well. He's living in a house on the estate in Switzerland. But that love, he says, is so pure, I'm going to glorify it. And I'm working on this Ring cycle, which I'm never going to get done. I'm halfway through it, and who's going to produce it? He said, I'll write 2 little pieces. And one of them is Tristan and Isolde, which is one of the biggest, most complex operas ever written, very, very hard to sing. And then he's also going to write, he said, well, I'll write a comedy, Die Meistersinger, which is 5 hours, enormous choruses. It's a beautiful, Wagner's only comedy. It's got its funny moments in it, but mostly it's a wonderful tale of a middle-aged man in love with a younger woman who has to give her up for more appropriate woman, thinking about art, etc. It's got wonderful choral music in it. And what Wagner did, as we'll discuss in Tristan, he's going to write very chromatic music. Here's where he becomes truly Wagnerian. Continuous melody, you don't get aria 1, applaud, aria 2, applaud, stage action. No, you hear music and, hours later, you're still hearing music. It goes on continuously with breaks for the music. And it's going to be very chromatic. The notes are there. They're not just standard keys. Really moving along. It's almost dissonant, but it isn't, because then it moves to another music. But oftentimes you don't know what key you're in. So Tristan is actually considered very important for music. Also, it's very much of a psychological drama. Nothing happens. It's like a Seinfeld. The couple fall in love and they express their love. They sing of each other for hours on end, or look back at their lives, etc. But Tristan, some would say, is Wagner's greatest works, maybe one of the greatest operas ever written. I happen to be fond of the Ring cycle. So anyway, he's not going to get the Ring done. So he works on these 2 little operas. He gets incredible experience as a composer. Of course, it's not easy to get these works produced either here. But he is going to write these 2 operas. And yes, Holly includes my old editor. Not old, my previous editor. Here. But I want you to listen to a little bit of the prelude to Tristan and Isolde. It's very, very well known. And most overtures, and they'd be potpourris. You get a little bit of melody from the opera that's put together, and then you move into the opera. Now, Wagner is trying to set up the mood here. And what he does is, there's a Tristan theme, there's an Isolde theme. The lovers, they come together, but they don't really belong together. As we can get into what the plot is. And what you will hear in Tristan, you'll get this very unsettled yearning. It's never settled down. It keeps moving along. It only settles if you know the Liebestod at the very end. When Tristan has died, he's been killed, and Isolde dies for no medical reason. The singing of his glory is, she may or may not die, going to heaven. But you'll hear in the very beginning, the Tristan music again. This is not the man who wrote for brass band. You'll hear this, and maybe 5-10 seconds in, you'll hear the Tristan chord, which is, people have argued over it for 150 years. What key is it in? We don't know. It's really a mix. It's dissonant music, and it's when music, not everybody liked it, became more dissonant. Strauss and Schoenberg and others. Everybody wrote dissonant music before. But this is continuously dissonant because it doesn't want to settle. Just goes da-da-da, you're done. But you'll see the Tristan music goes on. So I'll play a little bit of it, or Air Boulez. This is a youth orchestra. Really else. Here. You hear those themes overlapping, building up, never really settling, and then you'll end with a prelude again. Wow. You hear that very beautiful, but again, never settled music. Those of you who know the score, it's all about the love trying to come together. And at the end of it, it starts out with that distance. What's fascinating when everything seems to settle, both in the prelude, but also at the very end of the opera. You hear it again. The story isn't over. So turns out Wagner is going to be saved. Remember, he's chasing the bill collectors. He's trying to get his work performed. A couple of times, he's a popular composer. Lohengrin's very popular, Dutchman at this point. But he can't go back to Germany to see his own work. It turns out there's a young man, or not so young, Franz Liszt, great composer who loves Wagner's work, actually gets some of his work produced. Wagner is going to marry his daughter. We'll get to that. So Wagner finds himself in a town. There's a tap on the door and Wagner immediately starts running to the back door thinking it's a bill collector. But he says, there's a card, the king wants to see you. Oh, sure, the king is a bill collector. Not so sure, the king does want to see you. And who is the king? The newly crowned king of Bavaria. Remember, Germany is a set of separate states here. So 18-year-old Ludwig loves Wagner. He loves the myths. He loves Lohengrin. He loves swans. He's going to be the Swan King who's going to build a great castle, Neuschwanstein, in Germany here. And he offers to support Wagner. He said, I'll pay all of your debts. I'll give you a house. You can, I'm going to sit at your feet, basically. Kind of a mistake for him. But does very, very well, though, for the world here. Wagner gets involved in politics, et cetera, lies to the king. And the king said, I want you to finish the ring cycle. You'll have no worry at all. So, and he more or less does that. And Wagner takes advantage, and takes advantage, and takes advantage, et cetera. But Ludwig, ultimately, we have to love the man, and we should. He's a fascinating character. He will complete the ring cycle. He will make sure Wagner can complete it here. He will also build, Wagner says, Ludwig said, I have a wonderful theater here in Munich, and I'll give you this money so you will do the ring cycle in Royal Theater. And Wagner says, yes. But then he's off scouting real estate, and he builds another theater, which he can't get financed. The king said, I'm not going to help you now. But then he realizes, I, king, have to help you to get this done. So town of Bayreuth has Wagner's own theater for his work. It's kind of amazing. If you think of what Wagner did, you go back to the Mozart days, composer and his servant. Here's about Beethoven, kind of a titan. People realize, tells the prince, you are only a prince, I am Beethoven. Here's Wagner, who's known around the world, who manages to build his own theater with a lot of help to stage his own works. So anyway, the exile gets lifted for Wagner in the midst of all this. He goes to Munich, he gets involved in politics. People are a little concerned because he's separated from his wife, who will die shortly. He's very fond of Hans von Bülow, great German conductor, married to Cosima Wagner, Cosima Liszt, Franz Liszt's daughter. Well, it turns out he and Cosima have an affair. All the time, Hans Bülow is the one man who can conduct Wagner's orchestra, operas the way that he wants. Eventually, it becomes a very open affair. She goes off, marries Wagner. And tells you something about Wagner. Hans von Bülow says, if it had been anyone but Wagner, I would have shot him. So anyway, he goes off to Switzerland. The king gives him a very, very nice place to live. I've been to that house, actually, on a lake. It's not bad. This is not the house that he got. But, King Ludwig loved Wagner. And I don't know if you noticed it. I'm sure some of you have been to Neuschwanstein. It is a pilgrimage to Wagner. It's an homage to Wagner. It's scenes on the walls, the Tannhäuser room, the possible, etc. So Wagner will become the master. Here's the old Wagner up in the corner here. His wife Cosima, his brood of children, several of which came with Hans von Bülow. One came in between. There's a fight over her. And then his two Newfoundland dogs. He loved dogs. I love Newfoundland. So he goes to Bayreuth in 1872. He finishes up the Ring in 1874. The Ring, the final opera, is going to be Goethe Dämmerung. Ludwig has forced him to produce Rheingold and Valkyrie, and says, I want, I paid for those other two. Wagner said, sorry, they have to be done at my opera house. And they are. So the Ring cycle, it premieres 1876. It's a financial failure, though. Ludwig bails out the theater. It's going to be, torn down. The Bayreuth Theater is very much alive and well. Don't know if anyone has been there, but two Wagnerians. It will come back in 1882 because Wagner will release his final opera, Approachable, after the Ring cycle. The Ring cycle, despite Wagner's claim, I will never let it be performed outside of my own opera house. He needs the money, and a Jewish impresario takes it. He's a great friend of Wagner's. So, Wagner, he's kind of like Michael Jackson. He's living, with his ego. He has this magnificent house. You can visit it, bonfide, free of care. And he's a celebrity. He's considered to be, the greatest composer, at least by many, or the most hated. A lot of people say, we don't like his music here. We don't like the man, perhaps, etc. But Nietzsche is a friend of his, and then he falls out whole industry's whole volume. Wagner's life here. So he will finish off Possible, which is another Holy Grail opera, very mysterious actually here. And he will write that 1882. He's going to die in 1883. And I'll just play a little bit of Possible, Holy Grail, and just has beautiful, delicate orchestration. So Wagner is spinning out his themes here, and you'll hear these throughout the opera. Get to the ring cycle in the next half hour. I have a lot to cover from here. So the operas, they're long. It's about 14, 15 hours, that fills up that number of CDs. What Wagner wanted you to do was pretty good, and it's probably good advice. The last way to see a Wagnerian opera, or almost any opera, go racing there after work. Oh, what's playing tonight? Possible, sure. Not know the language. What's it about? Read a paragraph. What am I doing for the next number of hours? Wagner wanted you to study the libretto. He had the idea, going back to the Greek festival, you were going to go off, at least with the ring cycle, and enjoy it. That was it. You would go, you watch the opera for 4 days with a few breaks, etc. It's a very nice way to do it. As I said, I've done it about 20 times. So again, each one of the ring cycle deserves a, eight spirit session class here. Well, what does Wagner do? He's taken all these myths, he's taken all these legends, and then he's added a human element. Do we really want it to be about gods and goddesses? So we start out, it's a creation of a world. We have daughters of the Rhine River, central to Germany here. They're guarding gold. It turns out if you can steal that gold or swear love, you can rule the world. Now, conveniently enough, there happens to be a dwarf who's teasing, he comes, they tease him, and he said, you mean I can rule the world if I get this gold? And so he steals it. Well, it turns out the king of the gods, Wotan, and his crowd are high up in the mountains. They realize, gee, we could get this gold. And that's what the ring cycle is about. Their ring day, it's their ring day Nibelungen. Now, of the Nibelung, of this dwarf, of this Alberic character that you'll see. So the king of the gods is going to steal it, but then he realizes he has to give it back. Well, he has to use it to pay a debt, basically. Wagner would have liked this. This is a silliness. He gives it to a giant who turns himself into a dragon. I'm not making it up. And the ring cycle has Wotan and Alberic both trying to get back the ring. They're the same. And Alberic is going to use it for very bad purposes. Wotan thinks he can rule the world with it, but then there's going to be problems. And it turns out he can't get the ring back because of the treaties. Any lawyers here will appreciate this. Will keep him from getting it. It's a hugely complex story. Just believe me. So what Wagner did, he wrote a lot about opera, drama, wrote a book about opera. He had symbols in here. And he wanted to tell a story. He thought the music was very, very important. And this is what is so fascinating about Wagner here. He'll say, he talked about the complete work of art. I have a drama, I have words, I have music, I have scenery, I have dancing even. Not much dancing in the ring, but it all comes together. Everybody would say, in Wagner, the music is predominant. The story is out there, but what he did, the story is interesting, it's actually fascinating. What he did with music was unbelievable here. And the music really overwhelms. When you get to the later operas, you were hearing like the 10-minute funeral march. He could have just said, Siegfried dies. Now he needs to have a funeral march for 10 minutes here to develop it. And this is what he does. It's continuous music. You don't have arias of people talking through. And what he does, he uses the system. He didn't use the word much, leitmotifs. But and this is absolutely key. He would have themes, little bit of music. Sondheim would work this way. Little bits of music, and then he would develop them out. He would combine them together. He would lengthen them. He would bring them back. But what they are, what he called them, and it was absolutely brilliant, moments of memory. And very often, because I'm jumping ahead now to the movies, you'll hear a piece of music and it may or may not register. But when you hear it again, you may do it. And when somebody, The Godfather, I love the example, my brother, I love you. Then you hear some kind of sinister music and he gives him that kiss. No, that's not a happy moment because the music is telling the story. And that's what Wagner is. You get these musical themes, they build up, they come together. Incredible how they build, how they turn into each other, but ultimately how they reflect back and bring the story back to you. So, moments of memory. So there's about 100 motifs in the ring. There's an industry in counting them up here. Oftentimes you'll get long orchestral transitions. It's fascinating to figure out how they're related to each other. I'll show you a little bit of the opening of the ring cycle here. So you'll get a very low note. We're here ancient times. There aren't people, there aren't gods, etc. And what Wagner wanted, unlike other theaters, you go to the theater, everybody would be dressed up, looking at each other. Now, in Wagner, he wanted like a movie theater. The lights were off, his own theater was an amphitheater, etc. So you're going to get this very primal note. It's going to start to develop and move. It's going to become the rustling of the river. You'll eventually hear these Rhine, see these maidens of the Rhine guarding the gold, etc. And all of this music that you're hearing, you're going to hear later. It's going to develop, it's going to change. And it's going to change, at least 100 times, moving into these different motives here. So, and it's the simplest notes of a chord here. And it's just, brilliant, brilliant music here. So, I think what I'm going to do, here's the Bayreuth Theater. Here's inside of the theater. What's bizarre about this for Wagner's time? Where's the orchestra? They're under the stage. It's almost like being a movie theater. You're going to be there. Wagner just wanted you to look up onto the stage, onto the screen. And when you did that, this is what you were going to hear. And this is Loren Maetzel. You may know him. He wrote something, The Ring Without Words. He said, people don't want to listen to 14 hours of The Ring. So I'm going to pull together about an hour and 10 minutes worth of music. You'll have this video clip in the material. You might want to watch it. So Wagner is building up the river Rhine from that very simple Merc, straight out of Beethoven's Ninth, actually, into the music of the Rhine. Well, here's the dwarf. And what I want you to hear, he's the ugly dwarf. The Rhine maidens have been teasing him. He realizes he can steal the gold. And you'll hear what Wagner does. He's going to end the scene, and the way he wanted this to be done, unique for 1876, was the curtain wouldn't come down, so you get some sort of on-stage transition. You're seeing at the Met, it's a little bit easier. Well, what you'll see here, what I want you to listen for is he's going to take you from the Rhine River after the gold is stolen, after there's a I forswear love, you hear the music of the ring, very, very distinct. And then the music transition, Wagner orchestral transition, love transition music to what? The home of the gods, Valhalla. And you'll hear the stately music of Valhalla. If you listen carefully, you'll realize the music of the all-powerful or very flawed gods sounds a whole lot like the music of the ring. They want power. You may not notice that. You can look at the music and you can see it. And if you think about it, you heard them together, you'd see it. But your brain is telling you. And that's what Wagner is doing. He is telling you a story with his music.
Erzwäng ich nicht die Liebe, doch ist nicht erzwäng ich mir die Lust. Spottet dazu, den Liebung nach dem Spiel. Finstern, feuchtes Gesicht. Das ließe lästige Haus, entleise dem Richters Gold, schmiede den lächelnden Ring, erhöhe sie Flut. So verfloh ich die Liebe.
We moved from the depths of the Rhine to the mountains. Lightning up. Almost the theme of the ring. Sweet version of the theme of the ring. Oh, I just look at the sound a lot like what Wagner is going to do for the next 14 hours. Next opera, the Valkyrie. Well, this is the most popular of the ring cycle. You'll often see it done alone, too. And you'll see the gods as humans. This is what makes it interesting. So the ring is gone. It's being kept by this dragon. Wotan wants to get it back. He has the Valkyries, 9 daughters with the Earth goddess. Sure. And they go off and get heroes. His favorite daughter is Brunhilde. he has a scheme where his son, he's done nothing to help him along, Sigmund, will get the ring back for him. Until his wife points out, the law won't let you do that. So she forces him, you have to kill your son. He's going to lose this battle. And he goes to his favorite daughter, Brunhilde, who said, you're going to go help Sigmund, so he can go get the ring for me. Said, no, that's all over with. You have to kill him. That's it. And he pours out his heart. And he said, this is terrible. Some people would say it's incredibly boring. Some people would say it's the best part of the ring cycle. In 20 seconds, he said, I wanted power. I thought I could have it. I did everything I could. I'm the most miserable of men. I'm kind of trapped. I'm losing those I love. But then he says, you daughter have to go off and kill Sigmund. And she goes off and she said, see Sigmund. And it's great scenes and go on the opera. But she says, no, I love him. As a human, there's something else in this world beyond power. So she basically tries to save him. Wotan is furious and she goes off. When it turns out his wife happens to be his sister, he has Sigmund's sister, and off he goes, and the Valkyries are gathering. That's when you'll hear the ride of the Valkyrie. But it is this central act, which some people consider boring, him pouring out very little music, a few leitmotifs. It's just the heart of the work. Incredibly moving here. Brunhilde saves Sigmund, and Wotan, eventually the god, says, I'm going to punish you. You're no longer a goddess yourself. You're going to fall asleep on the rock. You're going to be taken by the first man who finds you. And says, brother, no, I know you love me. I know I did the right thing. He agrees. And he said, I'm going to save you. I have to punish you. You're going to sleep. You're going to be surrounded in a rock by fire. And only a hero who is worthy of you. That will be the next topic. That is Die Valkyrie in 2 minutes. So it's a beautiful story actually here. So let's hear a little bit of Ride of the Valkyrie. So here the Valkyries, so Brunhilde has escaped and the Valkyries are just having a wild time. Basically, Wagner wanted to wake up everyone. It's grand music, most famous music he ever written for sure. But I'm going to give you a bit of that, but I want to take you just to the fire. You got the Hoyo Tohos. This is a 1970 production. Well, here's the fire after we say goodbye. Incredibly powerful, incredibly moving music. as her father punishes and says farewell to his daughter. Here. We get to the opera Siegfried, here, coming of age story, beautiful music, boy singing under a tree, wondering who his parents are. And when people say Wagner only wrote Valkyrie, Ride of the Valkyrie, no. It's a coming of age story. Story's long. He's raised by a dwarf who wants to get the ring himself here, has a dragon getting killed, etc. But ultimately, he wants to learn fear. And what does he do? Well, he finds a sleeping woman and kisses her. So his introduction to sex. The one thing that scares him, except for the teenage boy. So it's got some great music in it, and I'm watching time here. What I want to do here, though, is there is a scene. Remember, Wagner writes Act 1, Act 2 of Siegfried, and then he stops. Then he goes off, he writes Meistersinger and Tristan, and not in that order. And he's a much greater composer. And he finishes off Act 2 pretty much the way it's written. When he gets to Act 3, he is an unbelievably accomplished composer. And Act 3 starts out with an odd scene. It turns out the king of the gods is now called the Wanderer. Wotan wants to give up his power. He wants to give it to Siegfried. And what he's doing, and to Brunhilde, he knows Siegfried is going to go wake up his daughter. He's given up his power. He realizes it's the end of the gods. And turns out Wagner writes the scene of him going off to meet Mother Earth to get some information. It's all music you've heard before, but he transforms it. The orchestra is very different, and he's telling you a story in the orchestra. And it turns out Derek Cook was a well-known British musicologist, did a nice analysis of the ring cycles and its motives and how they came together. You'll have that in the material. I'm going to just play a little bit of this. I wish I had time for more, but I have another opera to go to. It's fascinating stuff. And again, you've heard this music. You may not know it. It's there. You've heard it differently, but it's telling you the story, making links. And so about Goethe Dämmerung, I don't have the umlaut on my computer. Here, Twilight of the Gods. It's a long, grand opera. Remember, Wagner wrote the libretto first, but he's a much better musician when he finally gets around to it. So it's an old-style plot. It's not like a French grand opera, a little bit like Pansy in this way. But he uses duets, a chorus, trio, things you'd hear in Verdi in a good way. It's like French opera. I think can be wonderful, and it is. But then he's using that big Wagnerian orchestra. He's really, really leaning on it to use the themes he has to develop the stories. So basically, the plot, 4.5 hours, is that Siegfried, Brunhilde, and Siegfried have fallen in love. They've consummated their marriage, etc., etc. Siegfried is given a drug by the evil people next door. He forgets Brunhilde. Brunhilde wants revenge. Siegfried is killed. Brunhilde realizes he always loved her. It was a trick. It's not much of a hero here. There's bad guys in Goethe Dämmerung, etc. So she learns what's happened, and she said, "I loved him. It's all because of this gosh darn ring." So she's going to give it back to the Rhine maidens, make the world pure again. She said, "This is what my father wants." She said, "Farewell to the gods." This is where the fat lady sings, the so-called aria here. And she will sing, and then there will be a funeral pyre. And then how do you end this opera here? Siegfried burning, she jumps in with the ring. It's pure music, just telling you the story of the ring. You hear the Rhine maidens, you hear the castle of Valhalla collapse. And then ultimately, and this is the piece I want you to listen for, you hear a piece of music, absolutely beautiful. You've only heard it once in the ring cycle. It used to be called the Redemption by Love theme, but we now realized, and quite right when it's pointed out to you, it is Brunhilde. You've heard it. It is the redemption. She's become human. She's realized, the God's time has come. We're passing it on to humans. Power is not the important thing. It's love the important. So beautiful story when you put it all together. It's absolutely spectacular, of course, as everything is burning. Wagner didn't know how to end it, because how do you show this burning on stage? Well, sometimes well, sometimes not. But here's a little bit of the lady singing. This is Gwyneth Jones. She'll say farewell to her father. Raven. Singing farewell to the gods, to that god that Valhalla voted. And the lady in the back. Off she goes to the funeral pyre, everything burns out. Well, I'm just going to play the very end of the opera, where you'll hear a little bit of Valhalla as it burns. You would have heard the music of the Rhine. This is Wagner at his best, taking his different themes, telling you the story, pulling it together, and at the end of it, glorifying Brunhilde, remembering some, 8 hours before. When somebody sings glorious, Brunhilde, you are the most glorious of women. And that's where that music comes. Okay. Sometimes at the end of the ring, you've had the end of the world, a new world reborn. if you will. I saw what Seattle like to do, what a lot of productions will do. The Ring can be anything. Oftentimes it's ecological. You see a world become very corrupt, grubby industrial country, but at the end you see Seattle is like trees together. So why is Wagner great? Any ideas? Go ahead. Tell you. Now, his opera's been widely performed. There are about 3,600 performances at the Met. That's 13% of all performances. Used to be very, very popular around 1900. I think what Wagner did, he created music drama in the opera house, changed performances. That's important. The opera houses are now dark, etc. Here, his music, very, very powerful. Now, there are people who live and die by Wagnerian music, who really get swept up in it. Passions, Wagner could touch us in ways other people couldn't, etc. And I think what Wagner did, I mean, his real influence, it's not like there's a lot of Wagner to me, and I have to get into fights with Wagnerians on this. I think Wagner was more of an end than a beginning. People did not end up writing Wagnerian opera. Opera kind of petered out. But what composers did, as much as classical concert hall composers did, they either accepted Wagner or they didn't. But a lot of them started writing more dissonant music, more continuous music. They were less concerned about what form was. Bigger Mahler, they would write for big orchestra, they would put in orchestral effects, they would write program music, et cetera, et cetera. But I think his big influence in music was what he did with harmony. Other people did it. Liszt did it. The most famous Tristan chord, Beethoven actually had those chords. Bach had these chords, but Wagner really developed them here. But his great influence on music, I'm going to show you two places. Music in general was what he did with tonality, made music much open. Absolute master of orchestral sound. I mean, I think you can agree. Wagner, great orchestral music. Some of it will come from operas. There'll be overtures, preludes. Others are going to come right from the middle without the voices. It's just going to be the background. You can listen. That's what makes it unique. And I'm going to claim I might go 5 minutes over. So Wagner's greatest influence is here. And we struggled with this slide before. You may recognize this movie. And you may recognize a theme, because I think what Wagner's music, classical music, let's face it, kind of went away in 1900 or thereabouts. There's music out there, but not that much. But the music of the 20th century is film music. Turns out when the film musicians, film composers started working, they were Austrians. They were classical composers who weren't going to write the great Austrian symphony or the great American symphony. They were going to write a film. What were they going to do? They were going to use big orchestras with a lot of effects, a whole lot like Wagner, and they were going to use themes. The example I had here was Casablanca as time goes by. Watch that movie and ask how many times do you hear it in different forms. I had to steal another movie. We had a little technical problem.
God is my
If you truly want a movie that's been studied for leitmotifs, Star Wars. 9 movies. John Williams, who's 93, just had a great book written about him, had said he never expected it, to go for 40 odd years, but it let me take themes and combine things and bring back moments of memory. There's some scenes apparently in the latest Star Wars movies. There's very little dialogue. It's just the music, but you listen to it and it's bringing back, remember him as a child, as he is here now, etc. So a guide to his musical universe, here it is. You can go through. It's like a theme of the leitmotifs of the Ring. So enjoying Wagner. Here's what the slides broke down. I want to wrap up on this, and I'm almost going to make it to 80 minutes. You can enjoy him as an orchestral composer and as an opera composer. The operas are wonderful. You should give them a try. If you say I'm allergic to Wagner, but maybe this class is going to help you. I'm going to give you some books here, but you should have the libretto. You should know what you're getting into here. But Wagner wrote to entertain. I mean, move you. And I think he succeeded. There's lots of orchestral collections, even things called Wagner without words. Here's Ring without the words. And Lauren Maisel, he just said, there's so much great music in the Ring. You can't often put on the full Ring cycle at an opera house. You don't see it very often. Houses. But you can put together 70 minutes of music. And we heard it here at the National Symphony. You'll get plenty of opera performances on DVD. I showed you a little bit of there's a whole, lasted forever, The Ring at the Met, but also there's a famous production from the 70s. There's some really weird productions out there now, particularly from Europe. And we all go there. You can read a good opera guide, even Wikipedia. This is true. I don't care if you're seeing Hamilton, a Sondheim show, a Puccini opera, or Wagner opera. You should know what you're getting into. Wikipedia will give you some good information to start. A book I'm going to recommend, William Berger. Anybody who knows the Met will know him from the Metropolitan Opera broadcast. And he's done a good book on Verdi with a Vengeance, Puccini, With a Passion, I think it's called. There's another book, Thomas May. I'm going to show you the covers. And you can join at very little cost. I'm a board member of the Washington, D.C. Wagner Society. It has a lot of events, and even has me as a lecturer. Really good lecturers, a lot of concerts, most of which are free. And they support Wagner singers, which is not an easy thing to do, to break into the world of singing Wagner in particular. So, almost at my time. Here is Wagner Without Fear, Learning to Love and Even Enjoy Opera's Most Demanding Genius. It's a fun book. It's not a very serious book. It will tell you a lot about Wagner. It will take you through the operas, the highlights, what to listen for. It's a good book. Decoding Wagner is a little more serious. Good book. It has 2 CDs. So one is $15, the other one is $30. There's some very nice excerpts from the RCA catalog of Wagner. Other books I'm going to mention, The Sorcerer of Bayreuth by Barry Millington. This is a horrible production of Die Valkyrie, which I saw at Bayreuth. Here's Brunhilde, who should be, the father lovingly says goodbye to her. He strapped on a gurney and injected her. Goodbye, Brunhilde, as he sang. This is what you see in Europe, including Wagner's own theater. A book I'll mention, Alex Ross. Some of you may know him as the New Yorker music critic. He spent years writing a book about this thick, 3 inches thick, on Wagnerism, art and politics, and the shadow of music. Very little music in here, but more the ways Wagner influenced the arts, painting, and in particular literature. The idea, think of Joyce's Ulysses, because Tristan, or Botan's monologue, characters expressing their feelings through their subconscious feelings, themes coming in that recur and blend into each other. That's what Wagner theorized for opera. A lot of people took that into literature and other arts. Wonderful book. Here, if you're interested in The Ring, Emo and Lee, you may know Father Lee, did a very short book. This is 100-odd pages, 150 pages of that on the Ring cycle, really tied it to myth and what it meant, etc. These were lectures he gave at the Met. If you want a little more, if you want your Wagner 103, this is not overly academic, but the Cambridge Companion to the Ring cycle. As I said, the literature is recording. Very famously, Georg Schulte conducted at London Records. This is when stereo was coming out, when popular records were ping pong balls, playing across the stereo arc. They did Das Rheingold, full orchestra, all the sonic effects, thunder, etc. They then finished that up 7 years later with some of the great voices of the time. Used to be, you paid hundreds of dollars for these sets. You can get it for about $40 now. Pretty good recording. If you like, and I'm going to give you links to this recording. You don't have to buy the recording, but you can hear the themes of the Ring cycle analyzed by Derek Cook, how they all tie together. It's fascinating stuff. If you listen, if your assignment might be to listen to Lauren Maisel for 70 minutes, get the Ring in your head, then listen to the Derek Cook. Maybe read through the plots. You should really get the Berger book at a minimum here. The D.C. Wagner Society, here's Jeffrey Swan. He just wrote this wonderful 990-page book. He's going to be talking. It took him, like Wagner, it took him nearly 50 years to do it. It's a wonderful book. The Wagner Society sponsored him too, and he gives a lot of concerts Yeah. Great book if you want your box. And then somebody is coming, I hate the picture, comes from AIR, but he is doing Wagner Lives at Theaters Everywhere. And it's the idea that Wagner's great influence was in the movie theaters. And this will be held free of cost. You can always give the speaker a tip. But at the Arts Club in Washington, I'll be doing it on Zoom. I hope you all will take a look at the Washington, D.C. Wagner Society in any case. And you'll see my talk announced with others. So, well, I think you came to one of my talks. So I'm going to thank you. And I went 2 minutes over.
Do you have time for questions? So those of you who are online, please put your questions in the Q&A and I'll be watching. I don't see any yet, but those of you who are in the room, what questions do you have for Dan?
Questions, comments? A lot of people are allergic to Wagner. I hope you're less allergic. Yes, miss.
I was taken by what got you started on this passion for Wagner.
Wagner.
Thank you. Method to my madness. My daughter sent me a tweet last night of my 5-year-old grandson sweeping the kitchen with his little broom. And this is what he's singing. And I'm sorry, I know the piece, but I don't know who wrote it. I can't remember. Dun 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 dun
Unaccompanied Wagner.
William Tell, but it's famous, whatever.
Yeah, unaccompanied Wagner is close. Yeah.
Okay.
So your son is singing, grandson is singing this at age 5 as he sweeps the floor.
He's singing that, and I said to my daughter, tweeting, "Oh my God, he's a musical genius. Where did he? Are you playing this? How is he picking that? He just turned 5." She said, "Bluey, the dog, the cartoon." And I thought, wow, you never know how just one little cartoon. I mean, imagine.
I don't know, Louis the dog.
She said they have a lot of.
Yeah, well,
It's all classical music on it at times.
she mentioned her grandson has heard, just because people outside may not have heard this, unaccompanied music and other music from Bluey the dog, which apparently has a lot of classical music baked into it. What's surprising is a lot of the Warner Brother movies actually did have that music. And I lied because my introduction to Wagner, well, and actually I did lie there, probably was Bugs Bunny. But what actually got me interested in classical music, and the whole reason I'm giving these sorts of talks on anything, is when I was about 10 years old, my mother wanted to get me out of the house for a bridge game. So told my father, well, see what he wants to do. I said, well, I'd love to go to a movie. This is 1968, giving away my age. Space program is popular. Go to see 2001. My father said, what is this? I loved it, and I loved the music. It was unbelievable. I came from a completely unmusical family, but I went to a librarian. Let's keep your libraries alive and well. And a record librarian. We didn't have a record player at home. No one thought of that. But I got a chance to hear that music. And Richard Strauss, with also Schwarz got me interested in Richard Wagner. And the first set of talks I ever gave before a group like this was a Wagner talk. And somebody said, why don't you do, my partner said, why don't you do something fun? So now they'd rather hear Cole Porter or Gershwin. So that's all. Yes,
So we do have 7 questions online.
you do have 7 questions.
Just a comment at the very beginning, Carrie said
Sure. Yes.
Nazism, and that was, relevant to the anti-Semitism. And then the next question is, if music is occasionally continuous during the opera, no arias, where are the people on stage? What are the people on stage doing during those long musical interludes?
Trying to be very good actors. I mean, sometimes you wonder what, if you're not going to be bowing. I mean, characters are going to come on and off the stage for sure, but it's a style of music. You're not necessarily highlighting one singer coming out and singing. One singer may sing, another singer may sing. It is a different, some people say, what do you do though when you have a 15-minute monologue? You just kind of stand there and Brunhilde in Moten Act 2 is a good example because Brunhilde basically does nothing for 15 minutes. He says, tell me more for it as he pours out his heart. It's unbelievable what he says and the music that goes with it.
Mark wants to know, are there any promising productions of the Ring Cycle coming in the next couple of years? No. Okay.
Yeah, the best productions of the Ring Cycle, the one at Bayreuth, you saw the end, the world going up in flame, and Brunhilde calls for a horse. She and the dead Siegfried are in the bottom of a filthy swimming pool in the inside. And Rana, her horse, is a shrink-wrapped human head straight out of the dark tunnel. There's a lot of strange productions out there. Having said that, there was a beautiful production, certainly at Seattle, in the Metropolitan Opera. You get that on DVD. They did have a production done about 15 years ago. They used a big mechanical machine, it was called. A lot of projections in opera houses. You get a lot of projections. They are going to be doing a full cycle in 2030, and I think they're developing it year by year. I think it's 2027. I believe the Washington National Opera is doing Tannhäuser. They did a Wagner night a few years ago. They did actually a pretty good ring cycle, probably 10, 15 years ago.
If we wanted to make a once in a lifetime visit to Bayreuth, where would we start?
The pub, the oiler is very good. Now, yeah, I would see what the productions are. The productions have gone downhill to the point it used to be impossible to get tickets. Now you can walk up the day of the production, and they're like doing concert operas. They're under a bit of stress now. They still have, it's incredible. One of the best experiences. I'll answer your question. One of the best things you can do in Bayreuth is, remember, Wagner had written his operas. He had written most of the ring cycle. Then the theater is built. And he always said, the ring cycle is not quite right for Bayreuth. I need to redo the instrumentation. He died, but he worked on Parsifal, and which was a very special. He wanted to keep it only in Bayreuth, to obviously it came out. But when you listen to it, he wrote it for the house. And it is the most incredible sound that you get when you hear it. I had a friend, the Parsifal production 20 odd years ago featured This Is the Holy Grail and Redemption. It had a big projection of a rabbit covered with flies rotting throughout the entire production. And he said, if you put on your airline sleep mask, it was a very good production. I happen to see a pretty good one. You can have one of these productions. There has to be a reason for it. Too, when you update it or move it to another time. When it's just, why is that person there? Why is she calling for a horse and out comes a human head wrapped in shrink wrap? Now that doesn't make sense. But possible if you have to go to Bayreuth for one opera.
So I think we have two more. Is the Wagner Society targeted mostly at people with a lot of Wagner experience, or can relative newbies enjoy it?
All over the place. Yeah, there's obviously people who know a whole lot, and we love to have anybody come in. And it got me to Bayreuth. It's a very active bunch of people. If you go to their website, you'll see, I think it's the 25th anniversary. Here's everything we've done over the years. Surprising how many speakers, concerts they've done, and again, all supporting Wagner.
Comment, great movies. I think of Korngold from
Yeah.
Melanie. And last question, what do you think about the Anna Russell album? I'm sorry if I overlooked anybody here.
Now, this is the last question is most important, actually, and it's part of your homework here. The Korngold was a musical genius. And at 11 years old, Gustav Mahler says he's a full composer. He wrote for the movies, and he gave us some of the most amazing scores. Have a beautiful symphonic scores here, straight out of Wagner, straight out of Korngold. Yeah, one of the great composers, John Williams, writes in that tradition, even though he said, I'm not writing Wagner, I'm writing Korngold, whoever he's writing. It's built up. Anna Russell was a rather large lady, now dead, but for many, many years, she's something of a failed singer, opera singer. But then she made up a routine mocking classical music, satirizing it. But to do good satire, you have to know it, you have to love it. And she gave a 30-minute version of the ring cycle, all of the craziness. But if you listen to it, it's actually pretty good. Oh, everybody is related. I'm not making this up. That sort of thing, and you'd see her at the piano. One of your homework assignment is to watch the Anna Russell clip, which you'll see. She did this year after year after year. I think she lasted in the 1980s here. So I have a clip of her. If you know the rings, it's actually not a bad introduction to the ring cycle, including the material that you get. Wouldn't put too much weight on it. I have a 3-minute version of the ring cycle in cartoon. Then you might try Anna Russell, but you should try the real thing. But Anna Russell, whether you know the ring or not, if you know the ring, you probably know Anna Russell. If you don't, you should listen to it.
Okay, one more question. Do we have time for? Okay, I didn't notice that.
You're doing great.
Wait. David asks, why was Wagner of special influence on cinema scores compared to other popular composers? Was it because he relied less on voice?
Well, it is, did he rely less on voice, which is another way of saying, did he rely more on an orchestra? I think that's probably what it was. It was German. It was later in the time. These composers, many of whom were leaving Germany, were essentially trained in the Wagnerian tradition. His operas are go. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of room for Tchaikovsky and others. But Wagner, particularly those composers with the big orchestra and the use of themes, really drove it. There is a story I'll tell very quickly. Really one of the first movies that had music to it. Remember the talkies came, well, Al Jolson sang whatever he did, and then they played Tchaikovsky's Romeo and Juliet. It made no sense. They just took an existing recording. They made some musicals that weren't terribly good, and then they were making dramatic films and didn't really think of music. And RKO put a lot of money into a movie called King Kong. And people thought it was hysterically funny. It's a guy in an ape suit going up and down. The dialogue wasn't very good. It's Zephyr from Kong and such. And Max Steiner, who had been in Hollywood, he'd been in the country for a while, said, let me put some music into it. So he actually made a theme for different people. He actually put love theme. So when you're watching King Kong and the girl, you're hearing, Kong is alone and he wants someone else. It's bringing to your mind what Wagner wanted. And people loved it. And they stopped laughing. And then at that point, very quickly, film music came in, and Hollywood had big orchestras. And for my money, it is the classical music, the concert hall music. Best-selling concert album of all time is a little thing called Star Wars. It sold, I think, 5 million copies.
Yes, I'm sorry, but he's had a question right there.
Yeah, just a very quick question. What kind of influence do you think Wagner's Ring Cycle had on J.R.R. Tolkien?
What influence did it have on Tolkien? Tolkien would say very little. In my story, everybody wants the ring. In Wagner's story, everybody's trying to get rid of it. May not have told that time. They have some of the same sources, but no, Tolkien was a scholar of that literature, and he told a different story. It's some of the same sources. One of the best movies, though, in terms of leitmotifs, obviously you have some of the John Williams, but absolutely superb, is the Lord of the Rings series. And what the leitmotif, it's a big orchestra, beautifully done, 100 themes. But what music does to that, it ties things together, particularly a long movie, and you're wondering who that character is, what's their relationship. Well, you can tell it dramatically, or with a little bit of music, you can get it down.
You think Dan is passionate about Wagner?
Yeah, everything. I hope you enjoyed it.
Passionate about. Somewhat, yes. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Dan is always popular here, and he didn't disappoint us now. You're
It's a lot of coming.
a lot to cover, but very well covered, very well done. So thank you very much. Don't forget to fill out a survey. We can send it to anybody that's here, and also online you should be getting it automatically. We have other fun events coming up, so don't miss them coming up. And by the way, some of our tours sell out quickly, so if something comes up, sign up for it right away. On September 29th, we have Memorializing Enslaved People in Arlington. That's going to be a Zoom presentation, so don't miss that on your calendar, September 29th. September 30th, Area 2 Farms is a tour that Nancy is doing. Nancy's here. That's a vertical organic inside farm in Shirlington. Great fun to see, so please do see it. And it's a limited number of people that go, so please do on that. October 6th, David Poole, who founded the VPAC, which is Virginia Public Access Project, is coming to talk about how he started it, how he engendered trust among on a bipartisan basis. That alone should get you there to understand how he did that. George Washington University Museum is a tour on October 7th. On the 16th is National Cryptologic Museum, learning all about codes.
That would be good.
Definitely do that. Oh, all of them good. But that one in particular. And then one of our big events this fall is Ken Avis, who many of you know has taught classes here. He's a historian, musician, and he's running a program, an in-person and remote program about the music of Northern Virginia. And as he said, we're gonna rock. And if you know Ken at all, you will know we will rock. So don't miss that also on the 23rd. Please though, do sign up early for any of these things because they really do pull up. Dan, thank you so much.
Welcome.
Really, thank you so much.